G'day, mates, ladies, and gents, and wherever you may fall on the gender spectrum, I guess. You're tuned in to Frivolous Gravitas podcast with myself, Christopher Driver, and my delightfully lovely co-host, Mr. Jordan Roy, co-producer as well. He's a man of many talents. So wherever you're listening to us, over whether it's over iTunes or YouTube or wherever you get consume your brain food, welcome. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about adulthood and its many forms and varieties, and the important factors that sort of hinge upon what our conception of idealist views of adulthood, as well as the biological adulthoods, I'm guessing we'll probably cover as well. So before we get too deep into the subject, I just want to stop and sort of mention where I'm coming from, just so that we have some kind of baseline of the sides to the discussion from the outset.
So we know that adulthood didn't pay you off to make it sound good.
Yeah. I'm not endorsed or sponsored by adulthood by any means. Disclaimer. No, primarily in my understanding of it and exposure to it is just based on my upbringing. So there's biological adulthood, which is just the maturity of sex organs and, puberty and stuff like that. The completion of that I would consider maturity, physical maturity. Again, people are going to point out, well, there's 1 in 100,000 people who don't ever mature physically, and whatever. I'm not talking about that. So we're talking about not people with like distorted bodies. We're talking about just general.
Well, those people are special cases that require separate conversations on their own.
Yeah, so, and if you can't figure out exactly what we're talking about, then you probably need another podcast or something.
Suffice it to say, we're going under the assumption here that humanity grows up. Puberty is the process that biologically gets you to this, and this is how we're generally programmed.
Yeah, and that's enough to have a discussion.
Yeah.
The other side of adulthood, I would say, would be like cultural. So if you're raised in a church, like if you're Jewish or Christian or something, there's like confirmation when you're 15 or 16, or the rite of passage with the bar mitzvah and the bat mitzvah and the Jewish traditions, that kind of thing. I'm sure we'll be touching on a bit of that. But before we go in too deep, I'm going to toss the mic over to Jordan and ask him what his thoughts and opinions, views, and positions are.
All right. Well, I'm really far away, so before it lands, I'll just say whatever I want. No. All right, sorry, my cat is deciding that he wants to get in on my life right now. Everybody, this is Pixel.
Pixel, you're so immature.
Yeah. He's so immature.
Grow up.
So a lot of this comes from the I've been thinking about adulthood for a very, very, very long time, because at one point in time, believe it or not, I wasn't an adult, and some might even go and argue that I'm still not an adult, but
no comment.
Yeah. But I remember I think my earliest, so there's gonna be a lot of weird anecdotes probably from both of us, and you guys can come up with your own anecdotes. So if you have one that you're willing to share, because coming of age anecdotes are usually very full of cringe because of how stupid we were as children.
It's a funny cringe, though.
Yeah, it's it's funny for other people. Well, when we think about it ourselves, it's just like, why did that exist in the same universe as me? And you just want to hide under a rock and forget it ever had happened. So you're not going to hear all of my stupid stuff, but one I'm willing to admit, and I apologize in advance for my seasonal congestion. It may make me sound a bit sexier, but I'm definitely gonna be skipping around a bit. So excuse me for that in advance. So this comes from my thinking a lot, starting when I was on my 14th birthday, actually, where I woke up and decided I needed to be a man. And I tell this one every once in a while, but I woke up and I said, okay, I'm 14. I can't be a child anymore. I got to be a man. What are men? What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be this or that? And I was like my way through puberty. But because I was 14, I didn't know anything. And this is true particularly of 100% of all 14-year-olds. But it's especially true about male 14-year-olds who don't really finish puberty or like maturing until, well, a lot of them don't.
23, I think, is the general consensus.
Like yeah. Which is like you're physically mature once your kit's ready to go. But there's a lot more mental, like you still have a lot of mental stuff to go through. Your brain's not done developing. Your body still maintains a lot of like filling out in your early 20s, I remember.
The kid even keeps filling out until you're in your mid 20s, I think.
Yeah, it does.
Did for me, so I'm like, awkward.
Yeah, anyway, awkward. So if you're family watching this, you're welcome.
Congrats, you now know more about my penis than you wanted to.
Jesus. Okay, moving on. So what it was for me societally was I had defined unconsciously that being a man, and so when I say man and woman, I mean like adult human. So in contrast to boy and girl, a man for me was someone who was serious, someone who was, not one to play games, not one to like, someone who was, all business all the time kind of thing, because adults and men are the ones who don't waste time with frivolous stuff, especially with frivolous gravitas.
You think you got that mental image from your dad or your father figure or anything like that? Like, or from TV or books you read, or?
Honestly, I think I got it from my perception of myself at the time, because I think I had a very low perception of myself. And I think I saw myself as being quite frivolous, wasting a lot of my time, not knowing what to do. I was just kind of being a dumb 14-year-old. What I wanted was something more. And like, I know I'm being very vague here, but it was a vague feeling. I wanted something more serious. So naturally what I did was I acted like an asshole for an entire year. Because it's just like, no. But in retrospect, that me acting like an asshole for an entire year was me playing with, or cosplaying as an adult, me pretending, trying to be what it was as an adult. And everyone was still treating me like a child because, 14, you're still a child. And which was not like how they should have known what I thought of myself then or what I was trying to do. It's like, no. So I was trying to actively reject things. And when their idea of me and my idea of me and my ideal of me came out, what happened was nobody knew what the heck was going on, including me. And so, but I had definitely started some kind of journey to maturity, if to want to put it in a trite manner. But what had happened was it got me actually thinking for a long time, okay, I'm a boy now. Not now, but like then now. And what does it actually mean for me to actually be a adult? Because like I could have a job. Adults have jobs. It's like, well, I had a job as a teenager. It doesn't really count. And there's child minors everywhere. That doesn't count. So there's the physical part of it, which is obvious, which we almost don't even need to get into because it's just so obvious. Even though people are saying, well, it's not obvious. It is obvious. There are obvious physical difference. A man looks like a man. I can grow a beard. I have, hair in my armpits. I have weird marks on my neck or something.
Smells coming from everywhere.
Yeah, it's just I never smelled like this before. What the heck? And your voice starts changing. Everything gets awkward, and it's just bad for everybody involved. But when I was getting closer to like actually being an adult, I noticed that there were a lot of adults who were still acting like children. And I thought, okay, there must be some quality about it. And I kind of came to the conclusion that it was a decisiveness. which is kind of not what I think of it now, but I had decided that what an adult was someone who could make a decision and live with it. So we're going this way, and then just do it. Not to make a right decision, because that takes a certain amount of expertise and luck, but just to make a decision, to decide something, not to just sit there and let things happen to them, but to be the one who made a decision. Because you have children who are under the wards of their parents, and their parents are the ones who decide, okay, we're eating in today, we're having mac and cheese tonight, we're doing this. And a child is one who gets good. It doesn't need to make the decisions. An adult is the one who will be the one who decides things for themselves, who will use their own action. And so that's what it seemed like to me. So what I needed to do was do my own action, and that's what would be. And if I got good at that, I would become, I guess, responsible. And in hindsight, what this is just a definition of is personal responsibility. But more succinctly, I would say it's the ability to just kind of say, I got this, and not refer back to anyone else. Just so the ability of someone to
take charge kind of thing.
Yeah. And this is kind of a very Jordan thing, because if I've decided on something, and if I decided something's a good course of action, I'll do it. I do tend to have a bit of a leader mentality. It's like, oh yeah, I'm a leader, which is kind of a awful thing to say in public, because anyone who calls himself a leader isn't a very good leader. But
I think the setting changes that too, though. Like, we're having a discussion specifically on this, so it's like sort of reasonable for it to come up in conversation. Whereas, like, if you're sitting at a bar and making poop jokes and knock jokes, and somebody just says, "I'm a grown up," you could
well, and that's one of the things about you hit on something really interesting there. It's like, one of the things about being an adult is you don't need to be told. And if you need someone to tell you, then you're not. It's kind of like that old Margaret Thatcher thing. It's just like, you don't need to be told or was she talking about women or power? But it's the same thing. I don't remember the quote. Essentially, if you need to be told you're powerful, then you're not. And so it's that kind of thing. There's something about adulthood that we just all can recognize. And
I'm not sure that everybody does recognize it, though.
It's an instinctual recognition. And not like, because a lot of people don't, and even in my life, there are people that still see me as a child. Notably,
parents always do.
Yeah, your parents are always going to see you as, a overgrown child. It's like, oh, look at you, I got you your favorite toys. It's like, yo, I'm 35. And
here's a gaudy Christmas sweater, please wear it so I can take pictures and show my friends at church.
Yeah, it's like, don't you know I exclusively wear professor sweaters because they're so warm and comfy.
My parents don't do that, but the old ladies at church did that. No matter how old you are, they just, you want some candy from my pocket? No.
It's like, I'm married and about to have kids. It's just like, we're planning kids, and it's just like, yeah, please treat me my age. I'm not that kid. We don't have that relationship anymore. I'm self-sufficient. And that's kind of one of the things, is that you look at someone who's an adult and you see there's a lot there. They don't just look older. They act a certain way. There's a certain swagger about them. There's a certain demeanor. There's some thing there that will make everyone be like, that person's a mature adult. And in the same vein, you look at someone who has the accoutrement of adulthood, but then you'll talk to them and you'll be like, these are children. Like for example,
my upbringing was kind of different. Actually, it was very different, but just for like a perspective analysis from it. Like I always wanted to be grown up because people wouldn't talk to me until I was grown up, and it drove me insane. Like I had things I wanted to talk about, like ask about the world and people's jobs and have those conversations at a obscenely young age. And so I did things like I picked up smoking early, and like I would do risky things like, you know, drive a car when I wasn't supposed to and things like that. And this is long before I even met you. I mean, like in my early teens.
But like that to me sounds like you were practicing being an adult. The same way I was being an asshole. You were driving cars and smoking and having arguments.
Though, is like, like what was his name? Jeffrey Arnett or something like that had a book called Emerging Adulthood. He talks about this phase, and it's like a theory of his. It's not actually like clinical or anything, but he is a doctor. But a phase of like between adolescence and adulthood, and that's all like the identity searching and like focusing on your goals and being self-centered, and you know, the things that you do before you commit to obligations that prevent you from doing all that stuff. And that's like in a late teens, early 20s type of phase. But like my growth into like when I used to look up to adults because they had all these like deeper conversations that I couldn't have with kids my age or even a couple of years older than me. So they were all boring. I wanted to start businesses and they wanted to talk about Pokemon. Like, when I started working, I got this mad culture shock because I had never been around adults who acted like children before until I started my entry-level jobs working with adults who were acting and behaving and speaking and everything like children, but they had like facial hair and the smells and you know what I mean?
Oh, I do. Well, I've worked,
but like, even worse, like my voice didn't change like ever. So I've always had a high voice. So I do that thing where you like waking up every day at 12, 13, 14, like hopefully today is the day. People are going to start listening to me because I don't sound like a child, and it just never happened.
Well, because
it was like an added frustration of trying to grow up, and then I just overcompensated even more to the point that when I got work and I was an adult, I still couldn't talk to the people I work with.
Because, well, I was doing the same thing. Like, why aren't people seeing me as an adult? Well, that's external. You're waiting for the world, and this is what that's kind of one of the things that shows childishness is expecting the world to change for you.
Yeah, for other people to notice, to validate your own adulthood kind of thing.
Like, how come you don't like, and this is the same thing as like, why aren't you using my pronouns? It's like, well, because you're a dude.
I'm not a child.
Yeah, and like, I'm not going to change the way I act for you. Like, I'm going to change the way I act based on subtle social cues that will allow for, you know, a harmony of action in whatever realm we're taking, which is a fancy way of saying like social cohesion. Like, I'm going to work towards what gets, you know, first, what gets the task we're doing done, and second, what maintains the cohesion of the group so the task can get done, and third, so maybe I can make friends, I don't know, talk to people, enjoy my time there. But like these things are not revolving around me, that self-centeredness that we have as kids. Like, why aren't people treating me like an adult? Can't they see I'm 14? Or like you, it's just like I can do all the things that an adult do, and you were taking the accoutrement of, you know, of adulthood, the things that you saw adults doing.
But I was seeking the acknowledgement. That was the immaturity, right?
Right.
It was waiting and hoping that people would be like, "Oh, this kid is so old, young for his age, or old for his age, or whatever you're an old soul." Like, how many times you've heard that? And like, I used to think that meant something, and it absolutely does not.
Yeah. Or I don't know how many times like my mom called me like an indigo child. It's like, that's dumb. It's ascribing to me something metaphysical that like, I have to get my physical together before I can get my metaphysical together. Oh, some people might disagree, but that would be a metaphysical lie in any case.
So long as they use a mature brain to do it.
Yeah.
Like a physical brain.
Yeah. And so, but like you see this in movies too, and a lot of people have maybe almost to a detrimental extent, you see people like who are adults, and being adult means being hard boiled and hard. And I think I talked about this in our cynicism episode a lot, when we kind of ranted about cynicism, because you get like someone who just sit there and they're drinking and they're smoking, going like, the world sucks and I hate it. And it's so childish because you have this person who's just sitting there suffering, blaming the world for their problems. Oh, sorry. I just sat down and got comfy. Who is sitting there blaming the world for their problems. And what in reality it is just these childish adults who are, let me just shake my brain back into place. I was about to repeat myself for the fourth time.
But interestingly, though, there are tons of adults who do childish things who are still considered adults. Like there's always like the neat auntie who sits cross-legged on the couch and like doesn't sit upright like the normal people do, or like
right.
People like us who sit on the chair with our knees pointed straight up and moving around. Like I used to think that type of thing was childish until again. Later on in life, I realized that I'm not the only adult who acts like a child, like behaviorally.
Well, to that seems like there's two threads to that, and one is there's adults who never grew up who act like that, and you just kind of look at them with disdain, or like just sweep the floor. Oof. But the adults but then there's adults who have grown up, who've taken all that personal responsibility that I was talking about, people who will just, who have mastered their own life to some extent. And that's kind of what that means a bit. Found who they are, know what they want. But then at the same time, after they've done that, they've rediscovered what it meant to be, a child, because you do have to get rid of a bit to become an adult. You have to be, okay, I'm not going to do that for a while. I'm not going to do that. And then when you grow an adult and you got, you're stable. I'm a stable adult now. It's like, what are you going to do? I want to make model cars again. I don't want to stop doing that. And they'll join like like you get, old guys who join, model train clubs. And this is a big thing with older men.
Oh, totally.
And like there's one in the mall over here in Bonnie Doon. There's like a model train store. Or one of the big things now for adult men is you get like playing Warhammer or something, which is a game, but you also get to paint it, and it's kind of dangerous because it looks like an ADD guy's dream, but it also looks like it would take all my money away. So
it's the same with those train sets. When you see people painting like every little tree that they place on their mats, like I used to go to people's houses like from church, and they'd have like dinners and lunches or whatever when they have a bunch of people over. You'd be surprised how many of those guys had train sets, like really big, cool train sets that take up a whole room, And
it's
the interesting thing is when you're a kid, you sort of overemphasize those little things as thinking that that's childish. Like your idea of childishness is overemphasizing things that don't matter and underappreciating things that do matter, like responsibility, like you said. When I was a kid, I never thought of adulthood being responsible. I thought of adulthood being freedom.
Yes.
But freedom comes with responsibility. You can't just,
when you're a kid, you have
every day.
You have a different kind of freedom. When you're an adult, you have freedom. You do, but it's a freedom it's that responsible freedom that everyone like, that kind of freedom, like you can write about anything you want, but you have to do the work. I'm giving you perfect freedom here to write about whatever you want.
But you also take the consequences of your writing and your words.
Right. Well, when you're a kid, you have the freedom to explore and it's just okay. You're
and make noise and be vulgar, and
it's kind of like being in a garden versus
literally
being in a
get away
forest.
with murder when you're a kid.
Yeah. But you think of childhood play as like you're in a garden, you're running around, and adulthood, whereas like now you're in a forest. It's dangerous. It's still fun, but now you got to watch out. You have freedom, but there's consequences to this now.
You can make fire, but you can also burn the forest down and kill yourself.
Right. And when you're a kid, play is also geared a lot towards, sorry, that was gross. Play is geared towards exploration and learning. It's like, this is gonna, you're practicing being an adult a lot of times is what a lot of these developmental psychologists call it.
Socialization too, like playing with rules and following each other's agreeing with each other's imaginations. Like you have to take some ideas from other people, some ideas from yours.
I remember soccer games turning into just So everyone would just stop playing soccer and we just stand around the ball, like lazily kicking it about, being like, no, if this guy headbutts it into the thing, you can't, you can't headbutt it into the net. Yeah, you can. I've seen it I've seen it in UFC. You can do it in the game I played. Oh no, but like in this game, you can't. Well, I think we should allow it. And then, 15 minutes later, when the recess bell goes, everyone's been standing around instead of playing. They've been having a massive amount of fun time, even though it seems like they wasted their time. It was still kind of like strangely fun, discussing what it meant to throw a ball when you bounce it twice, and you're playing this rule building game.
And as an adult watching that must be fascinating to watch a group of 15 kids that can do anything on the playground just standing there and having diplomatic arguments. Like,
yeah,
I would be so proud of that class.
Yeah, and then like we made up rules for a game called kickball. I remember in grade 4 or 5, where we'd wait till it was like nice and iced over on this concrete slab, and there was 2 nets, which were those there's like steel beams with a foot boot scraper, so you could scrape your boots off. Those would be the nets because they were right across from each other. And instead of a soccer ball, we'd have a tennis ball, which was nice and hard to kick. And we would just make 2 teams, and it would pretty much just be like anything goes soccer. But you couldn't, like, the teachers hated it, and it was,
violent as hell.
It was so violent, but we learned so much. And I'm definitely, or I guess the other aspect of it would be, that's the rule building, that socialization. But the other aspect of child play, I would say, is exploration. Because one of the things I did the most when I was a kid was just hop on my bike and go. I would just explore. I mapped in my head perfectly the subdivision I lived in, and the next one over, because I could. And the only thing stopping me was my fitness. So the more fit I got, the more exploration I could do. And if I found all the nooks and crannies, it was like discovering magic when I was a kid. And nowadays that translates into the, like, why don't we just do this? Why don't we just do that? Like, what's stopping me? Nothing. Well, I don't know, which is now not really part of my vocabulary, unless it's like, no, we could actually, get put in jail. But that aspect of it was very healthy. Now, to contrast this, when you rediscover your childhood, you're not doing it because you want it. You have an appreciation for the thing in itself. So you're playing with trains, quay trains, qua trains, which is another word. Never mind. You're playing with trains because of the thing in itself. You're going out with your friends to play soccer for the thing itself, because you're fully aware that this is an excuse to get out and meet your friends, and you know what's going on. But you're not. You have a mature appreciation for it, which is kind of, but like,
we're so much more efficient with our socialization as adults. You know what I mean? Like, we can get together with a 2-second phone call. It doesn't take a lot of organization or planning. Mm-hmm. Like, when you're a kid, you're not socialized well enough to have those types of conversations quickly and effectively.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you want? Oh, I don't know. Oh, but not that. And you know what? Some adults never grow out of that. That's one of those things that I'd like to talk about today too, but not necessarily right away.
I do want to get into failure to launch and stuff like that.
But getting back to like the childhood to adulthood thing, just the compare and contrasting. Even with adolescence, I find I wasn't very good at coordinating social engagements as an adolescent. I was just strictly in the moment now, kind of whatever caught my attention, I just zoomed to it. I had no forethought whatsoever about what was fun. If I saw a bug and I sat down and started watching a bug, I didn't care who looked at me, who saw me, who thought I was weird. I was just like, I'm a kid, I'm allowed to look at bugs. Like, that's a normal thing. But having that type of perspective made me kind of also think like, oh, one day I won't be allowed to, or it won't be permissible or like socially acceptable to do certain things. So I almost felt like I had to do some things while I was a child because that would be my only opportunity. And I think that's a false narrative, if you want to call it that, but it is just something I made up in my head and believed blindly.
No, I got a lot of that same thing from I guess it was from the media. Well, in the 90s, that's kind of 80s and 90s is when that childhood worship stuff started, where it's like everything's great when you're a kid, and they were marketing everything with children on them. It was just started to get really creepy. And there's this definite trend in our society about worshiping childhood and we definitely got into this with the cynicism episode where we have, this dichotomy between adulthood and childhood. But essentially, you think that, and we're told that, and it's like, oh, I'm a child, so I'm allowed to do this, or I'm a child, so I'm a free spirit, or I'm a child, so I'm like this. It's like, no, none of that is real. If you're a child, one of the defining features of being a child is being dumb.
Yes.
But they're smarter than you think. It's like, yes, because
But they're still dumb.
We're dumb too. So what?
It's actually really interesting too that you mentioned that, because like the generation difference, I think a lot of people think that's just like a make-believe thing, but there's like an economic value to it in like the demographics having changed. Once the boomers were old enough to start having kids, all of the marketing was being pushed to kids and to parents. There was no in between. And now that all the boomers are retiring in their senior years, you'll notice that all the advertising's about like IBS and psoriasis and
Maybe
diabetes and weight loss and all that. So like demographics like
could be
change the psyches of generations just based on the media we consume, based on the demographic change, which I think is fascinating.
Well, part of that could be that you're not watching like, I don't know, Teletoon anymore or something.
I'm not watching any TV anymore.
Yeah, don't watch TV, people.
But I used to watch the news when I was a kid, so I do have apples to apples comparisons.
I did that too. I remember watching a kid as the news, and I'll be like, "You're watching CBC," blah blah blah, and I'd be like, "I'm so adult right now." Yeah. And then now looking back, it's like, man, they were just, the news doesn't tell me anything. I just felt like I was being told stuff and studying and being responsible.
But every time they showed a picture of another place in the world, it was a country I'd never heard of, from a continent I didn't know existed, in a biome I didn't know existed, with people that I've never, like everything was new on the news.
Mom, where's Kosovo? And she's like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And I had nothing to do with, like, I had no knowledge whatsoever of the events that were going on, but the news would show me real places with real things and real people. And it was like comparing that to a movie of Police Academy where everybody's just silly and dumb. Like, I'll take the news 5 times out of 10.
Yeah. And like children's what do you call that? Entertainment is notoriously either way too pedagogic, like, we're going to teach you something. This is a learning experience, but it isn't, because it teaches you like to count to 4. And so ages 7 to 10, it's like, oh, come on. And or it's just absolute nonsense, and like geared towards kids. And there's very few actual children's programs that are actually takes children seriously.
But for context, like before the internet, kids used to, like, when they go visit each other or whatever, one of the things you do when you're bored on a sleepover is you go through the encyclopedia set.
Oh man, I would.
You know what I mean? Like,
because there's pictures of stuff in there.
Yeah, exactly.
It look up airplane, and it's just a bunch of like World War II bombers, and it's like, cool.
I think it's important to mention that too, because I think a lot of people, anybody who's younger than 30 right now, probably never even had that experience. They've always had Google,
Well, the other thing is that kids also used to be able to, now, geez, we're starting to sound like that. Kids these days.
We're way over the hill.
So kids these days aren't allowed off their property or something like that. Like, I don't know. At least I remember Winnipeg, kids weren't, it was seen as, gauche to let your kids play in the front yard. And so you had to have
back in the day.
Oh, now I would go off.
Yeah, back in the day, we just had, the streets are full of kids back then.
Yeah. And, like, kids need to be attended at all times. And it's like, no, it's not, well, do you want your kid get hit by a car? It's like, that argument is terrible. I hate when people say, well, would you want this? It's like, no, that's not what I'm asking for. Like, part of growing up is accepting risk.
And not part of being stupid ultimatums like that.
Yeah. Part of being a kid is learning how to deal with that risk, because, well, we're risking stuff every day. Like, oh, I want to drink this. Oh, but it's got a lot of caffeine. is caffeine actually bad for me? You have to weigh the risks, and it's just like, maybe I should drink tea instead of coffee, less caffeine or something. And marginally. But you need to play with risks in order to understand how to deal with them.
So how do adults deal with risk based on, like, relative to their childhoods?
Well, you learn how to do the calculation, I guess. And plus, then you learn how to be like, okay, I'm going to lose something here.
But don't you find adults are more risk averse than children? In not every case, but most cases?
Nowadays, yeah. But like,
Like, I know people who won't invest in the stock market because there's way too much risk in the stock market, but these same people would kick firecrackers with me in a parking lot. You know what I mean? At some point, their calculations almost go overboard. Like, they over what do you call that when you over jump the gradient descent? Overshooting?
Overkill. But, well, we talked a lot about this in my safety episode. Well, I guess I did lead that episode, but I think in the safety episode, we talked a lot about that, like safety has in its relation to risk. I think a lot of times, like in our worship of children, that we think that no risk is worth the life of our child. And you hear that all the time. And it's just like,
and life is totally worth the life of your child.
Yes. It's
the life of your child. Yeah, not that you want them to be gone, but you want them to live. You don't have kids for them to not live. That's not the point.
I was reading a book, I think actually it was yesterday, and this parent said, okay, we'll let ground rules happen when they were raising their kids. And they say, okay, we have ground rules for risk. This and this, don't risk that. You know, your head, your torso, your heart, you know, don't risk anything, you know, here. Limbs, extremities, shoulders, skin, go nuts. Fair game. You should end your childhood with a couple wicked scars.
Totally.
But you should be able to learn those risks. And you start with easy things, and eventually an adult, I guess, here's what I'm going to argue, is that an adult is someone who's properly constructed a mode that allows them to ride the line between risk and safety, or risk and danger, where they can understand what they're getting into. I guess an adult is someone who has learned the calculus of that. And it's good to start with something simple, like, you know, don't put your head in danger. Wear a scarf. Like, well, I'm cool because I'm not wearing a scarf in the winter. It's like, well, okay, you've been watching too much Game of Thrones where they just have their heads uncovered up at the wall, and it's just, anyone in Canada is just like, those guys have pneumonia so hard right now. Yeah. and you just like put a hat on, Jon Snow, geez. But at the same time, you know that a kid can die from pneumonia. So what do? Well, now you can get him vaccinated. In fact, I'm vaccinated for pneumonia now. Go get your pneumonia vaccine right now, everybody.
PSA. Service announcement.
I didn't know there was one, and I was so hyped when I learned.
I didn't know there was one either until you told me. So glad you mentioned it.
Yeah, but the thing is, a good way to stop yourself from getting pneumonia in the winter is to wear a hat and wear a scarf, something to cover your breath holes in your neck and your respiratory system from freezing up, because a lot of that is stuff that can freeze.
Yeah, it's just inflammation of like the small little pockets that hold air in your lungs that convert it into the blood, I think.
Yeah. So when you learn to do this, you learn all these little calculations as you're a kid. And it takes a lot, because you learn a lot of little calculations until your whole calculus is done. And then once you figure, it's like, okay, once you got it, once you figure out, okay, I think I can do this on my own. Because there's a certain amount of independence with it that comes with growing up. And that's kind of, I keep coming back to that, and I can't not, because once you got your calculus, then you can start your kind of post-adolescence where you be like, okay, I'm going to try some stuff. And boy, did I try some stuff. I think we all did. Where I like started getting a job and was like, okay, now I'm going to make money on my own. And it's like, oh boy, do I suck at waking up early. Now I got to figure this out. Now do I suck? But now I'm attaching that calculus, all those things I learned unconsciously, into the world. And now I'm learning to I'm taking some steps, but those steps are on my own. And I found whenever I took steps on my own, it was better than if I asked for help, which is strange because they say, oh, make sure to ask for help. It's like, well, I'll ask for help when I've exhausted my faculties. Like if I've sat there, like I've got a problem at work, I'm going to stare at the problem for an hour before I'm like, okay, I need help. I can't. And that's kind of what they want from you. They want you to fix the problem, because if they need to go fix the problem, well, they either fire you with someone who knows how to do the problem, or they could just do it on their own. Well, then why would they hire you in the first place? So you are there as an independent entity doing independent work for the most part. And so you need to act as if you are a fully capable independent entity in the world. And part of that is learning how to act. That socialization, that enculturation, which is a word that I keep having to find. So you become more.
I think Arnett called it emerging adulthood.
Who called it?
That Dr. Jeffrey Arnett.
Oh, okay,
yeah. He wrote a book on it, or it was a thesis that turned into a book. But
that's usually how it happens.
Yeah.
I think my wife keeps pushing me to get my doctorate, and it's probably going to end up being my first chapter expanded into a book. But
I do think, though, like the way we've changed to raising kids towards the safety, like we talked about in that safety episode there, I think that's going to have like long lasting effects on people's maturity. And when we're talking about adulthood, I'm specifically referring back to that whole maturity thing. Because like it's one thing that, we can still make poop and fart jokes and stuff at 30, 40, 80. It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, but they're high quality poop and fart jokes.
Right. It's the quality, not the content itself for its merit.
They become feces jokes.
They are feces farces.
Fecal farce.
Farcical feces. Anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's the big difference, because like when kids make jokes, sometimes they don't even get simple puns. But when adults make jokes with puns in it, like everybody gets it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that difference is it is biological in the sense that your brain is functioning at a different level, but you've primed it for all these years, having tried and failed the stupid things and then realized the easiest way of going about things, like being straightforward when you're communicating to somebody. Hey, let's meet at this time. Is that good for you? Yes or no? Okay, done. Let's go.
Right.
Whereas kids are like, should we do it in 7 minutes? Should we do it in 15 minutes? Is anybody watching?
That's from trial and error over the course of like 20 years. Like,
yeah. So I think like preventing kids from having that trial and error makes adults that are just mentally stunted. Like,
right. And you see this all the time. And I do remember, like, there's a difference between, to provide an example, I guess, there's a difference between, hey, maybe do you want to go out and, on a date with me, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, the girl's just like, because she's also as awkward. Yeah, maybe I do. I don't know. You think that would be fun? It's just like someone watching's just like,
kind of, sort of, a little bit like you, like as a friend kind of thing. But
but maybe not. And the adults just hold her hand already. Jeez.
Yeah. Just kiss her. No, it's a microaggression.
Yeah. Well, that's part of
harassment.
And I think that comes down to like time and place, but also mastering those little things. Because I remember I was doing job interviews constantly, and I could be a bit of an awkward fellow sometimes, but I was doing so many job interviews in like a 6 month period or something, or over a year, because I was like in and out of like 5 or 6 jobs. It was just an unfortunate chain of like, oh, I really shouldn't be working here. I'm going to get another job. Oh, this was way worse. Yeah. I need to go get another job. Okay, now I'm a server. I'm making tips and my job sucks. Oh, wait, there's another better server job over there. Oh, look, an actual job for me in a museum. I'm going to go do that. And so just kept doing interviews, and I was acing every interview after a while because I just knew what I needed to say. And I was just like sitting there. I would be like, yeah, you should hire me for these reasons. And I was just walking in with, I guess, large phallus energy and acting like I already worked there. And people were like, oh yeah, this guy does know his stuff. And it's like, yeah, because I was practicing by doing the thing. And that's what and I got confident at it because I was confident in actual ability instead of like a false confidence. That, oh, I've got imposter syndrome. It's like, well, you have imposter syndrome because you are an imposter. Okay, maybe there are people that actually do have that, and we all do have it to some extent, but that's neither here nor there, and that's a complete digression. So let's get off that and get back onto your point, which was man children.
Growing into it, yeah. Like when you're prevented from having those types of awkwardnesses in your youth, those situations that everybody should just kind of go through as a matter of course to gain common sense to move forward with. Like little things, like when I got one of my first jobs, it was like people would the people I was working with would be surprised. Oh, you don't know how to use a mop? You've never mopped before? And I was like kind of sheepishly embarrassed. No, please show me how to mop. But like I've met 30-year-old people then later on at work who I've hired and have like university degrees, and they don't know how to operate a mop.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I was ridiculed, like, passively teased for being a 14-year-old who'd never touched a mop before.
Well,
But,
mopping,
like, 30?
mopping is a discrete skill, and it's like you can, and like it says something about someone, just like you say, like you don't know how to mop. You've never like just sat down and mopped. Like, wait, do you live on your own, right? It's like,
But even if you don't, like, you should still do something like
Right.
that once
And
a
so,
year,
like, imagine if you've like I don't know. I remember when you were working flooring and you hooked me up with one of the subcontractors. I swept so many floors that summer. But it's a discrete skill. You get better at it after a while, and you learn. It's like I can do this while
there's a
listen
technique to it.
Yeah, there is a bit of a technique to it, and it's not hard to learn. But the fact is, it's like you don't know it. It's telling me a lot about you. But that's a discrete skill. But when someone has like, can you not talk to people? Or you get someone who won't go on the phone. They won't make phone calls. They've never learned digital conversation etiquette. So like, or something like we're doing now.
Or people who type in caps. Like, God, where do you learn this?
Or yeah, and you have these things that they just like, you didn't learn this, and it's like, wait, why didn't you learn this? This is a requisite for this job. You need to be able to call people constantly. And so when I was working in the video store, one of the things we had to do every night was call a list of people saying, bring back your movie. Like,
I'm charging you.
I'm charging you if you don't. Like, I give them a grace period because bedroom community was 20 minutes
you
out.
need the
like,
repeat business in a small town.
I forgave a lot of late fees, but sometimes I was just kind of like,
They have to.
Yeah. And one of the things I would have to do was take my teenage employees, is a movie store. You don't hire like too many adults unless they're like just moms.
Jay and Silent Bob.
Yeah.
No, sorry, it was Randy.
Oh geez,
Randall.
Randall wasn't it? Damn it, Randall was the worst. But
he's my favorite.
But I would have to sit them down and say, okay, call the people on that list. Here's the phone. And they'd be like, you get all types of excuses. I don't want to do it. I've never called anyone before. It's like, what? Oh, I don't know how to use the phone. I'm like, beep, 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 go. And so eventually I would just stand there and do the job. Like I'd come in and be like, okay, you need to do the late list. It's like, I don't want to. It's like, did I stutter? Was that a suggestion? But what I would do is that they would just get used to it after a while. After doing the thing, they would confront their demons, which is calling people randomly on the phone, being like, hey, this is Jay's video, just letting you know that you have a movie that's due back soon, blah. And then, call them back after like a half hour and be like, yo. And it's like, yeah, so the next time you call them, just get progressively more stern. And man, I'd like turn it up to 10 sometimes. Like, bring back movie. And I'd go to their house and just be like, gish, gish, gish.
Molotov cocktail.
I get this broken CD or something. And what would happen was they'd get better at it because they would just, I guess this is that Jordan Peterson thing. You confront your demons and, you come out a man or something. But it's, I guess, more in line with the Jungian, what's that called?
Here's the peril with
the hero's journey, where but the journey is like, the hero's journey is like this thing where you go in and then you come out greater and better. And I could give an entire lecture on this, and I'm not going to. But essentially, you come back a master of yourself and your world. But in a microcosm of this, you just pick up the phone, you call the random people, you do it, and you do it enough times that it's not scary anymore. And that's microcosm of what it means to be an adult. Is like you just deal with what you need to deal with, and eventually you master it. Or
But I think you need to have a whole collection of those types of experiences to finally get this larger picture of what we'd call maturity or adulthood.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's being stunted when we're showing, like we talked about in our last episode or whatever, with the gratuitous reward system, while also not challenging people, while also keeping them too safe. Like this huge confluence of conditions are coming together and like conspiring against future growth of humanity. Like, our children are growing up in an environment that is completely separate from reality. Now they're becoming adults with degrees who are spending their education and all of that effort and energy that went into producing them as like productive adults. They're spending it like fighting microaggressions and creating isms to call and champion for, and, you know, being protesters without any cause or activation, and like not having solutions to the problems that they're complaining about. Like the things that we expect a professional expert who's trained and went through university and acquired a degree and has like mastery of some type of field of study or body of work, right? You expect them to positively contribute to the growth and progression of society, but they're stunted. And in that retardation, for lack of a better word, what they're doing is they're causing worse on the next generation before them. Like they're making it twice as bad by the way they're going about their setting up their isms. Like they're constructing their arguments based on childish premises. No,
and I'm actually teaching premises on in a couple of my classes, and why does this premises work? And like a lot of our premises right now are like a lot of the premises that we're setting up. You want to be a mature adult when you grow up. You're not growing up to be a kid. Don't name your kid like Billy, name him William, because that's the man he's going to be. And so you want to name him in expectation of what he's going to be. But the premises is that, we're giving them like safety is the most important. Your health is the most important thing you have. It sounds good. And in fact, having gone through a period of ill health, I can understand that, but I know it's wrong, because the thing that I was reaching for the entire time was not, oh, I want to be healthy. No, because you want to be healthy so you can do the things that are most important. The premise is bad, and your health is the most important thing. The premise is bad because I'd rather spend, if I'm healthy and haven't met my wife or can't spend any time with my wife, then it doesn't matter that I'm healthy. I'm going to be miserable. But if I'm sick, I'd rather be sick and be able to spend time with my wife than healthy and, have her be in Halifax for a year and a half, because it doesn't matter. So the premise is bad. And this is one of the premises, but one of the big premises I think that you brought up was, safety is one of the biggest ones, but to try to move away from it.
But there's a whole bunch, like even with the health thing, you've got an epidemic of diabetes and obesity, and all they're pushing is health. You know what I mean? But everything they sell is sugar. Why don't you fix the problem? The problem of people putting too much sugar in all your food. Like start lobbying towards some productive end, rather than casting everything else as like some type of evil goblin that you just have to resist and fight back. There's a social problem with how much sugar is in our food and we're giving to kids, because childhood obesity is a problem for everybody, not just for the people who have children. Let's deal with it.
And like one of the things I like ask my students a lot when I'm like, it's like, oh man, it's like, and I'll bring up sports all the time to emphasize like, move your body, and I'll tell them to work out. But like a lot of it is, I don't want to feel bad at any point. But an adult would say, how bad is this gonna be before it gets good? And it's like, you don't want to know. It's like, okay, I don't want to know, let's go. And a lot of times that's what it's going to be. Like, I've worked places where I would just suffer for 16 hours. Security was one of those places where it was just like, guess what? 8 hours of shift of, absolutely doing nothing that you like. Oh, guess what? The next guy's not coming in because he's being a man child and not owning up to his responsibility. And I was just like, awesome, 8 more hours of pay for me. And that's what it seemed like to me. I was just like, the end is worth the thing. But a lot of times when you talk about like microaggressions and all this, it's just like these kids think that what is bad, like these signals of that we think of as something that's telling us what to do in a situation. You have this signal of negativity. Oh, I've got psychological pain. Why? Because you're being a cringy jerk in public. Maybe don't do that. Maybe this is something that isn't quite right. Analyze it. There's something there as what was his name? The Book of the Five Rings, Miyamoto Musashi is just where in his book he would just say, you should think on this. There's something here. Meditate on this. And instead of doing that, they say, no, I shouldn't have to feel like this all the time. I shouldn't have to put up with this type of rhetoric. Oh, I shouldn't have to deal with Nazis. It's like, well, you're not dealing with Nazis. You're on a university campus. If there's a Nazi on a university campus, it's probably Halloween and somebody's doing a bad joke.
So I keep telling people who say Canada's turning into a fascist state or communist state, I'm like, look, just use a dictionary. That's my only advice for you. If you think Canada is communist, get a dictionary. Like,
there's lots of communists here. That doesn't mean we're turning communist. I think I think our government is incompetent, and I think they're using communistic rhetoric, but that doesn't mean I think it's becoming communist.
Yeah, it's just politics.
I am worried.
Like, we never blame capitalism for all of this. We just say like, oh, communism creates this type of incompetence in government. I'm like, no, people create this type of incompetence in government.
You get like business guy is always the bad guy in movies and stuff like that. And now we have kids who think that they don't want to work or something. Well, Scrooge was a bad businessman. Scrooge was a really good caricature of what an evil businessman would be, and he didn't take his partner for granted. He saw only the short-term gains and not what the business itself could do for everyone around him. And that's why he lost everything.
But that's also how he acquired his wealth. It took that type of obsession and focus to gain and amass that much wealth in that time. Well, people didn't just get rich like with a .com app they created in the bedroom, right?
Because his partner wasn't like that, and he had a partner who was probably his only friend, and he wasn't like that. He was, it's okay, I'm a businessman, so I can enjoy my life. And we're getting a little off topic, but Dickens is so good. Read the actual book. Don't watch one of the millions
Scrooge McDuck. Watch the DuckTales version.
Jeez, it's
always a good time to promote literature.
Yeah, this is a great time of year to maybe I'll make my students read it again.
I'm indulging.
Yeah. So, what was I talking about? But what was
his partner growing up, responsibility?
Yeah. So a lot of, so we're talking about university students who seem to be the most victimized and yet privileged people on the entire planet. And
you'd think they'd gone through like history or something.
Well, and the thing is that in our society, we expect people to be adults, or at least striving, or at least pretending to be adults by the time they're 18.
Yeah, they should be able to fake it.
And then you have students being like, you're not catering to me. You're not doing this. And I remember being at a party with the fellow, my wife's peers. And it was like a Halloween party or a Christmas party or something. And all the students showed up, and I'm like, these guys are like 22, 23. Like, I know they're supposed to be a little rough around the edges, but like everyone's complaining about too much work. And I'm just like, you guys have it set. Like, you guys have it made, and you're complaining how you have to spend $170 on a stethoscope, and you have like a house in China or something. Like, you like, you don't understand, like, you're not willing to take responsibility even though you have everything set out for you. Like, I had to work my butt off to get through it, and they have everything set. And I think that's the problem. You are not having to think about what you want to do with your life. You're not having to confirm who you are. You're just given something, and therefore it doesn't mean anything to you. But that's not a bad thing necessarily, because some of us, all of us, well, most of us are going to be beneficiaries of someone else's charity at some point in our life. But we need to be grateful for it, not like, oh, well, I just deserve that, which is, I guess, the adult thing to do. But one thing that struck me is that they're so fragile. Now, a lot of what we've been doing over the course and what we've been talking about is our journey to become anti-fragile. Humans are anti-fragile. You know, we ran our bikes down a hill and, you know, hit the pavement. It's like, well, guess what? You hit your pavement, you got a scrape in your arm, but now you're more anti-fragile because you're going to do it better the next time. But if you haven't taken your licks, the first punch is going to knock you out. And the punches are a lot harder when you are when you're in.
I think responsibility even takes a bigger role in this too. Because like when kids don't learn responsibility, like the difference between child's responsibility, like doing chores and having a job and going to school and doing your homework and that kind of thing, bring your pens to class. Like I was terrible for that stuff as a kid. But like growing into an adult, when I realized how important it was that people didn't look at me as a kid, I immediately changed all of my routines and behaviors and patterns. Like the things I did, even when people weren't watching, I practiced for when people were watching. And I think that's a sign of responsibility, like taking ownership of a problem. I almost never hear one of my employees or coworkers or something own a mistake. They will constantly tell you how that mistake was externally influenced by factors beyond their control. Like excuses galore. Nobody takes ownership of their own problems. And when I'm dealing with a client, I just say straight up, like if there's a problem, they say, well, what happened here? And I'm like, I could explain it to you, but it's my problem and I fixed it. It shouldn't be your problem.
Yeah.
Happen again.
Well, I remember having a teacher. My clients
love that. They want to deal with that. Like my warehouse guys were the same way when I was running crews through in the flooring industry. Like having the warehouse know ahead of time who's coming to their front door gives them just that 30 seconds, 2 minutes or whatever to have their stuff ready and pulled out, or to move the machine out of the way, or for everybody to not be in the bathroom at the same time. You know what I mean? Like that little bit of accountability and ownership and pride in your work, that's something I think that adults should all have had. And it used to be at one time when everybody like went to work at 15, 16, didn't finish high school. I think they picked that up really young. But as time went on and as life got easier for everybody, and now university is just a baseline standard, we're basically pushing that responsibility thing off to like they're 19 when they're in university. And then they're like, we're going to start treating you like adults now.
All right.
Like they're just starting to treat them like adults.
This is why I always advocate that
our grandparents were having babies and getting married and going to wars and fighting for the country. Like the maturity disparity between our generation and 2 generations prior, it just blows my mind.
That's one of the reasons I talked about Remembrance Day so much in that one special, is because like these people just stood up and said, yeah, this is something that needs to happen. Like sacrifices need to be made. And yeah, well, I'll do it. And like that level of maturity, like that hard decision, is just like the moment you sign that paper, you might as well be saying, I'm already dead. And to say that is that amount of like, I hope I don't ever have to do that. But if it comes to it, I'd rather it be me than my kids. But it's
taking ownership of a problem to me is a sign of maturity.
Of what somebody said to me, I think it was at the paint store, and it was this childish guy. He liked Star Wars a lot, but he was very he got his stuff done. He never let it interfere with his work, and it was a hobby. And
Star Wars?
He just really liked Star Wars. It was
How would that interfere with your work? It's a movie.
Well, no, it was all like the memorabilia, and he'd like have the game, he'd these figures. It was just like, that was his thing. He just really liked it. well, whatever. He got his work done and he was good at it and he was responsible. But he'd always be like, everything is just an excuse. Just own it up and move on. Like I don't like any time you say, oh, this is why it happened. It's like, it's just an excuse. Doesn't matter. This is what happened. It's being dealt with. And so like, no, every time you try and make an excuse, that's a bad move. Don't like, an excuse is actually kind of useless when you think about it. It's like, why did you do this? Oh, well, it's like, you know what? That doesn't matter.
It's actually rude though. It's like a waste of my time. Like, I don't care how you miss something. I don't care at all.
Because you're asking for forgiveness when forgiveness isn't the thing that like, oh, I'm sorry, I did a thing, and then this happened and this happened. That's why I'm late for work. It's like
people make mistakes. You're forgiven. Fixed.
Yeah.
Like just
you're forgiven. Just act like move. Now it's not like, why did it happen? And everyone's like looking for justification for their inadequacy. Whereas
retribution or retaliation, like they want punishment and like schoolyard.
What you can do is, okay, I screwed up. Now what do I need to do? Because you had to do something before and that's screwed up. But now you screwed up and you have a different set of problems in front of you. Okay, I did this and then this happened and then this happened and then now I'm here and it took an hour longer, but it happened. And they're like, all right, good job. Here's another thing. And
here's how to fix it. Instruction, guidance, that's productive. That's useful.
Yeah. One of the things I used to do that reminded me of also is that I used to work in restaurants and something happens every hour at a restaurant. There's just something wrong always at a restaurant. Like
dishwasher's broken.
Always some stupid thing. And you're probably somewhat to blame for some of it, but there's really nothing you can do. So what I used to say was like, just on my days off or when I move on to another job, blame me. Blame me for like 3 weeks after and everything will go nice and clean, because if you have someone to blame, just like, oh, this is Jordan, he did this, then everyone could be like, yeah, stupid Jordan, and then move on with their day. And everyone's like, well, why would we do that? It's so mean. It's like, you're allowed to be mean, but like, I don't care. It doesn't affect me. I'm not working here anymore. Like, and I would just take responsibility to move on with stuff. And like my wife says, she does this with her job all the time, because it's just like, oh, who did this? Oh, it was me. All right, moving on. And move on, because if you stick around and worry about guilt and shame and consequences and recompense, then we're all just sitting here being like, now what should we do to chastise this person? It's like, no, what matters is, well, I guess that's part of what being an adult is, with seeing what is most important at a time. And for you, when you were working at that distribution center for flooring, time is money. So if you let them know someone's coming, you realize that what's most important isn't the feelings of this and that. You're being polite, but you're being polite towards the ultimate goal of your job, which was getting supplies to the place and getting the people.
I think that's a sign though, like, of what people should be learning when they have all these crappy jobs, is learning how to figure out what the other person's objectives are. Yes. So like when I realize that my warehouse guys don't have to work as hard if I give them more information, if I put in a little bit of effort, it saves them a ton of effort. Like, to me, that's just an economics equation.
That's a use of, when I say empathy, that's kind of what I'm talking about. And like, everyone's like, oh, you need to have more empathy. And that means like have love for, and like, no, that's nonsense.
No, I'm at work. When I say money, like this is a game to me,
Yeah. When I say empathy, I'm not saying like, oh, we need to understand the other perspective so we can feel better. No. Empathy is, okay, the driver's coming in at this time. He's probably gonna, like, it's first thing in the morning, so I'm probably gonna need to explain it twice, after explaining it twice to myself, because I'm also tired. That's empathy. Empathy is knowing just what people are thinking and doing and feeling at a certain moment. And sometimes it's just like, what's wrong with you? Oh, I need to pee. Oh shit, go. Like, and
it works for like even delays and stuff too, right? Like if somebody's behind on their job and they need to swing by the warehouse at the end of the day, you don't want to show up unannounced at the last minute, because then somebody's packed up and ready to go and ready to lock the door. Now they got to put everything down, open up shop, turn all the lights back. All right. Just give them a phone call. a 1 minute, not even a minute, you call up and say, hey, there's going to be a trades guy coming by right before you close because he's late. Sorry. But at least you know, right?
Yeah.
That type of thing is more like, to me, it's a sign of consideration, like a compassion for mankind, for other people and their work and their responsibilities.
Well,
but it's not something that they should break down and cry over if I don't do it.
Well, and the other thing is that you can understand how, like, oh, this guy's going to feel bad about it and he's going to be angry. But part of being an adult is controlling your emotions. And if he's an adult and it's going to be like, all right, I'll do it. That like put my emotions down because it's not relevant. Oh, no, you shouldn't. You should let your emotions out. It's like, not all the time. That's childish. Because sometimes I need to control my emotions. Sometimes I'll get pissed when I do something wrong in the kitchen and I want to put a hole in the wall. And guess what? I don't put a hole in the wall. And you are going to feel like, oh man, I'm going to totally be putting this guy out by calling him and telling him to stay open for another 3 minutes, maybe, and do some work right before close, interrupt his closing routine or something. And
the alternative is I say nothing and I leave and then I'm fine. Nobody calls me. It's just two other people bickering far away.
But like, this is something,
anybody.
But like, this is also, but this brings up another problem, which is fear. And a lot of what we see here is a lot of people don't come to terms with their banal fears. They're like little
disappointing other people, you mean?
Yeah, like disappointing other people, or one of my fears was being late, so I would just show up early to everything, which I thought was, I don't know, it's not much.
I wish everybody did that.
I would just show up like 30 minutes early for everything. It's like, why? Well, first of all, because I could. Second of all, because, make sure. Plus, it gives me time to prepare. But at the same,
yeah, and no stress. Like nothing worse than rushing to work and then rushing through work and then rushing home from. Like your life is just a constant ball of stress when you're rushing.
Right. So fear is probably the most dangerous thing in our society. Period. If you see something happening, if there's a riot, it's from fear. If there is a movement of some sort, it's from fear. If there's a political thing happening, the bottom of it is fear. Fear is the thing that, it's that old saying, the only thing to fear is fear itself. But fear is the enemy. It's the worst enemy we have, and it corrupts the most, more than anything else.
All preventable fear is prevented by education, though. You'd think that would motivate people to know more, but it doesn't. Right. Like fear prevents people from starting to know more. People are so scared of a thick book, they won't even start it. Like, whoa, that's too much for me, man.
Oh, I don't, it's scary. Like, I might not understand it. I might realize I'm, this, then it paralyzes you. And this, oh shit, I was going to say something really profound, but I forgot it. But this fear that paralyzes it allows you, one of the things it does is that it can do is paralyze you. And when you're a kid, everything is scary, because everything's bigger than you. But at the same time, if you never grow out of that, it's like the fear of calling someone. And a lot of what we're talking about is this, I don't want to call those people on the late lists because, I don't know how they're going to react, or I don't want to go to work because I did a thing yesterday and I'm going to get yelled at, or I can't do that because, what if they find out I'm not good enough? And so what ends up is that fear paralyzes a lot of people. The other side of that is what happens is it also paralyzes parents, saying, oh no, I can't let my little baby boy do that because, I don't want him to get hurt, or I don't want him to have a bad job because I don't want him to be, unhappy at any time. So you ended up getting this, paralyzation that also keeps these boys. The problem is that when you're paralyzed with fear, your body is still maturing. You're still going through puberty. You're still turning 18. You're still gonna turn 25. You're still gonna turn 30. And the longer you're paralyzed, the more you're waiting. And I know this because, well, I was stagnant myself. I was working in jobs that I shouldn't have been. At some point, it was actually um, the realization of what I had done, luckily early enough, that put a better fear, the fear of God into me and pushed me back into education, because I had a bunch of bad premises. And I saw what my fear was doing to me. And so that became a greater, more existential fear. But I only got that because I wasn't being sheltered, because I was out on my own, because I realized that if I don't do this, then I will come to a bad end. And that was scarier than just, going in to the registrar's office and signing up for school, which was actually really hard for me because of certain things in my life that were, I had a bad opinion of education earlier because I had a bad education when I was a youth. So I was actually afraid to go back in, but the fear of getting hurt, the fear of not coming through without any scars, the fear of, little baby boy getting hurt, the fear, what if it doesn't work out? Well, that's too bad. You're going to have to go through it anyways. And we're seeing a lot of that. Like, how many young men do we know that are still living with their parents when they're fully capable of just going out and getting a job and making some money and getting a place, even if it's crappy? And
I wouldn't know. I don't leave the house.
I know a couple.
I hear it's quite common these days, though.
Yeah.
I also hear house flipping is common, so I don't know how the two jive. There's like people who are flipping 3 and 4 houses a year, and other people who are living in their basements while they're flipping houses. Like, I don't get it.
Well, to some extent, that's like, there are some people who are like, I'm going to live at home until I get my, money. I guess that's a calculation, but at the same time, one of the things that made me, the reason I'm so harping on this is because one of the things that made me grow up the fastest and the most effectively was moving out. All of a sudden, you're on your own. You're responsible for yourself. It's like, whoa, boy, 2 weeks later, you'll be an adult. I promise you.
But you get to do all those things that you would have been ashamed to do before. Like, when I first moved out, I'd order pizza like 2 days in a row, and nobody was there to snicker at me or whatever. Like, just little things like that to experience just once in your life, like that overindulgence, just a little bit, just to know what it feels like, because you can never do it again. Once you're married and stuff, you're going to have a spouse who's like, or you're going to be encouraged to do it all the time if they enjoy that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I went to full austerity mode when I moved out. Like, I was buying.
Well, I had to just because of finances. But
yeah. but that it's the scarcity and it's the adversity that actually helped me grow, because it creates that necessity. Because when you are going to a university and your parents are paying for it, and you are given, it's like, oh, I'm a little low. I only have $5,000 in the bank. Oh no. And it's just like, I was, what do you call it? I had my like change jar, and I remember rolling nickels to pay rent and being like, oh boy, I'm not going to make it. I guess.
Honestly, I think the greatest education I ever got in my life was poverty. Like, being poor changed my life from like childhood on. And then when you start to get things coming from a place of poverty, every little thing you appreciate. And then the big things you really, really appreciate. Like that school admission, that thing that just looks like a cloud dream that maybe one day you'll be able to reach. Like, for that to just be like, oh, school, I don't want to go. Can't I take a year off? Like, for that mentality to exist, you have to be coddled.
It's like, yes. Oh, like if I have kids, I guess it's like, can I take a year off? It's like, yeah, you can take a year off. You don't have to go to school, but you can't live here and you have to get a job.
Yeah, exactly. You got to.
I know a guy who works in a steel mill. He can get you working there. It's 14-hour days of absolute,
Or even if their dream is just to like make video games or something, and then they do it for a year at home and realize it's a lot of hard work, but they've learned something that whole time, even if they weren't making money. Like, they have to do something. But like moving out, I was dirt poor because like more than half of my money went to my rent. But I had a nice apartment downtown. I had all the peace and quiet I wanted. It was perfectly spotless clean. Just every day I went home. Like, there were parts of it that I really, really enjoyed. And before I could get like a relationship that was serious and like romantic or whatever, and like think of moving in with somebody else, I had to be able to also have had that experience to think back on, to be like, oh man, remember those days when I'd rent a movie and just sit in my empty apartment. It was just, me, or blast my music at 8 in the morning or whatever.
Yeah.
Like things that you can't do later on in life because of duties and obligations and commitments that you make, which are all very valuable. Like they're all worthwhile. But there's a point in your life that between adolescence and adulthood that you can do things specifically that time that you can't ever do again. And I think people are missing that because when
I
you
think
live
people romanticize that
time that you go to school before you're a professional, and then you get a professional job and everybody coddles you and with like protecting you with pronoun usage and verbal violence that they call, know what I mean? Like assault.
Yeah.
When they're not protected and you jump into the commitment phase, you never had that whole section of life where you were dirt poor, went out to parks and, talked to hobos and all the weird things that you wouldn't do when you're with somebody because you have company. It's just
and
that's a growth period, though. I think that's a really important growth period that most people miss.
I'm gonna make a note here quickly for something. But like one of the things that taught me, like I remember that grace period where I can do whatever I want. I kind of had that when I was a teenager. And I didn't really do anything good with it because it was like I didn't appreciate what I had. So like anything that I was doing, like, I can do whatever I want. I can go, and it's just like, wait, I've got no money. And I had that inkling. It's like, if you want to do it, like go get a job and then you can do it. But then I guess I must have skipped that phase, but I don't remember really doing that. I remember being like, oh shit, I have to learn this. Oh shit. And it was just a gauntlet of, and one of the things that I remember the most was like 2 weeks into it, I remember calling my parents up and being like, yo, I don't have any toilet paper. And my mom was like, so go buy some. I was like, oh yeah. Why didn't I think of that? Like I could like, oh yeah, toilet paper is my responsibility now. And it's just like this super banal thing that I just like. And
then your brain like reshapes though. Like it starts to think of everything differently. When you go to the store, you don't just look for food. You're like, oh, soaps, dish soap, cleaning supplies, ass wipe, like, carpet cleaner.
Like that conversation, I just like clutch, switch gear. All right, we're gonna be here for a while. And that was it, because I really like, oh, things are like I've got to just do it. Like I can't just let somebody else do it. And this is why we're so pissed off at some of these kids who are like, oh, you need to make sure, like you go to like a university and you'll talk, like listen to the kids for a second. It's like, how come I didn't, they didn't make the email, clear enough, or they're not doing this well enough. I didn't get the necessary information. It's like, no, you failed.
Like they whine about marks and then they get an increase on their marks just because the teachers don't want to upset them because they're paying customers. Like honestly, look at how many students whine about their marks to their teachers. Like, if you get 88% and deserve 94, whatever, it's one grade. Like, or take the 88.
Well, and I met students who would always be like, oh, I didn't get this grade, so I always just go complain every time. And it's just like, oh God, and they just change it. Like, honestly, if you're a teacher and someone does that to you, it's like, maybe you deserved a C. In fact, you know what? C-. But
you know what? They'll pass people. The people that should be failing are getting degrees because they're whining about their grades. So without the knowledge, they're getting accredited. Well, that's another huge social problem.
The problem is
like
that
engineers. They're building bridges and airports and shit.
Well, the teachers are also students. And they're being like, oh, well, I don't want to rock the boat. Oh, I'm afraid of conflict. So why don't we just have no conflict?
And I don't want to be violent by accident.
Yeah. And it's just... And everyone wants concord, and to be in concord with everybody, but that's not how things work. Like that's why working in a menial job or something like that is good, because you learn how to be. And I think this is a good segue into what that note I made recently, is that this is a good way of mastering your dark side. And that's one thing you have to come to terms with when you become an adult, and is there are times where you will need to be a bit of an ass, where you'll need to be disagreeable, where you need to sit there obstinately and, just be a bit of a jerk to get what needs to be done. And
especially in self-defense. Like if you don't have like an aggression mode that's been practiced and convincing, like you're a victim every time. Like I'll spot you from around the corner if I'm a thief, and I will just follow you and rob you because it'll show in your character, your candor, your what did you call it, your disposition or whatever.
Yeah.
It shows and it screams out, I'm vulnerable, when you're constantly afraid or nervous about the world around you.
Right. And like people take advantage of that. Like my the guy who I'll just name him, he's a jerk. Mike Babinski, who was a school trustee in Winnipeg, he would just strong arm people into getting what he wanted. And he learned that aggression. He mastered his dark side, but then he became, he let it control him, in the whole Jedi sense. And so he became that aggression. Whereas what you want to do as an adult is come to terms with the more negative aspects of your personality and learn how to use them, because you can't just be nice to everybody. This is not like, oh, we all need to just have more love in our lives. It's like, yeah, but how is love going to get that paperwork you said you were going to get done last week? Come on.
And love doesn't mean soft. There is a hard love. Like when I'm not doing well in school or I'm cussing out my teachers or something like that, you need to punish me. You absolutely have to show hard love. Otherwise, I think you don't care about me, and I'm just going to keep doing it.
Right.
I mean, I'm not alone in that. That's just like a psychological response. If you don't get punished for doing bad things that you shouldn't have done, like if you get away with it, you're just going to keep doing it. Like stealing or whatever whatever kids do.
Well,
that's part of showing love is the punishment. But
I just read what was it? It was San Francisco by Michael Schellenberger, and he essentially is detailing how the drug response to San Francisco's homeless population, it was essentially like, we just need to let them live their life and live their true life, and we need to give them drugs and places to live, and we can't be negative towards these guys. And no, these people who are on drugs need to be like, no, bad and they need to feel bad.
You can't punish people for addiction. That's more of a health problem.
But they
don't have health care in the States, so you're not helping people, and you're saying they should go away in the most expensive city in the world to live.
No,
it's really harsh.
The thing is that they're not saying go away. They're saying come here. Here's some drugs, and then they're enabling it because they say, well, we're a drug positive area, and they don't believe in things like, okay, treatment needs to be voluntary. You can't have involuntary, drug treatment. It's like, well, yeah, you can, and you should. And all the cities that are doing involuntary drug treatment and getting them off and weaning them off are doing a lot better. And this is what exactly we're doing to our kids. We're saying like, whatever you think is best, kids are stupid. They need to be like shamed. And this comes down to, and I think is exactly kind of what you were saying there, is what we were talking about earlier, is that pain is a signal, and psychological pain is a signal. Oh, I did something wrong. If I don't want to feel like this ever again, if I feel like this, I'm doing something incorrect. It's not, the world imposing it upon you. It's your body saying, yo, you're doing something wrong. And so this is the dichotomy that we have, is that one group, thinks that pain is a thing that we shouldn't have to deal with. And another group thinks that pain is a signal that we should be listening to.
I would make one minor correction to that, though. Not to say that it's wrong or I disagree, but I think my point of approach would be slightly different in the sense that I think people are too ready to shoot out for punishment now. And I'm talking about kids, children. Raising a child into an adolescent, yes, you punish them. As adults, if somebody misspeaks or is a little abrasive, or you don't like the ideas they harbor, but they keep to themselves. Like if I'm working with a Nazi, I don't have to like the fact that I work next to a white supremacist. But if he never mentions white supremacy or anything racist, I have no right to complain, right? But they just want to punish people for the sake of them being bad people, right?
Well, and you don't even know where that guy's coming from.
They want to create this dramatic little like a facade or whatever, a charade. They want to have this game where they play offended victims, or they play the heroes who are fixing the oppressors and stuff. And like, that's not what the world's supposed to be like. You're not supposed to spend all of your time and energy adjudicating petty disputes. You're supposed to do stuff.
Well, was it Oh, no,
But like
no.
punishment doesn't work on adults at all. You can throw people in jail. They're just more likely to say, well, my life's screwed anyway. I might as well do more crime when I get out of jail. Like a lot of people have that mentality.
Right. Or when they feel those bad, when they get that psychological signal, they'll be like, oh, time to drink.
Exactly.
But that's why we have to be like, with our punishments, we have to be
But an adult
wise.
drug addict is not going to be dealt with punishment. That won't fix anything. They've already hit their bottom. Like they're living on the street and addicted to a needle drug that can kill them any day they use it because they don't know where the drug's coming from. It's
Like,
just
that's an extreme example, which takes, like, it is extreme, but it's an example that almost like, oh boy, that guy screwed up so bad. But what happens when you have someone who's not there yet? You have a 23-year-old guy who's living with his parents, and the only thing he does is play video games. Like, what do? Well, you have to be a little wise with your punishment, just like we need to be a little wise and like see, okay, what actually works with drug addicts?
Well, if a kid is spending student loan money on drugs, absolutely punish them to the hilt and make them shamed and offended and everything you can think of.
What if they're taking that student loan money, spending it on their tuition, and staying home and playing video games and watching movies all day?
Yeah,
like
punishment.
Like we did when we were 16.
Because that's a childish thing, though. That like punishment is a response to a child's inadequacy or insufficient maturation.
But the punishment has to be thought through. So like, as the person whose responsibility is to be the punisher, or at least the judge and sentencer, then you have to, like, you can't just be like, belt off, whip. It's not going to be a good thing. You have to say, okay, you can't live here anymore. Well, why are you doing this to me? It's like, this is not a punishment. I'm kicking you onto the road. Like, I'm kicking you onto your path. And the kick isn't the punishment. The kick is just the force putting you there. And the punishment is now you have to live your life. And
I think without that, we end up with like journalists and stuff who want pitchforks every time somebody does something wrong. Somebody has got to get canceled or fired or, make a public apology. Like, what does a public apology do? Why do they even do it? Oh yeah, 20 years ago, I made a sexist joke on stage, so I'm apologizing to all women I've ever offended right now on camera so that, you know what I mean? Like, it's so empty. It's shallow and superficial. Like, just asking for it is shallow and superficial. The fact that we even demand that of adults in our society shows our immaturity and our childishness. The fact that we want to pin up our politicians as some kind of caricatures of evil and doom is just asinine. There's no way somebody gets into politics without a shred of decency in them.
Well,
and like, there's no reward until you're at the top. The whole thing is a grind.
The whole approach to it of politics is that we think they're trying to set themselves up as like TikTok stars, and like a politician is just someone else who's just as idiotic as we are, trying to do something. And like, the moment you're in politics, you're going to be evil to some people and good to others. Now, to be fair, someone who goes into office and then does a whole bunch of garbage, just an ineffective, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an ineffective guy that's not politically charged right now.
Sam Cates.
Cates? Yeah, Cates is a good example if you're from Winnipeg. Just an ineffective ruler, or you could argue Carter maybe. And everyone's just like, nah. Like, Cates was a bit corrupt.
A bit, yeah.
Yeah. The whole parking thing, like, parking Winnipeg is absolutely atrociously expensive.
Not just that, but like selling crown assets to his own companies and then like paying himself in shares, but like still collecting his paycheck.
He owned didn't he still own the Goldeyes, the baseball team in Winnipeg?
Yeah. There was a whole bunch of stuff with him.
So everyone's just kind of like, this guy's evil. It's like, no. Okay. Mature. You have to be like, okay, what would a mature person approach this be like? He's a bad administrator who's not taking the job seriously. And it's okay to hate that. Like, I really am not satisfied with Justin Trudeau's prime minister stewardship of the country. I think most of what he does is a bad move. If I had to meet the guy, I'd probably be like, yeah, I'll shake your hand, I guess.
Oh, I'd want to have a conversation with him.
Yeah. And so the mature thing would be, okay, if you can answer, what did you like about him? It's like, I sometimes like his China policy, his anti-China policy. I thought it was pretty cool that he, they arrested that one Huawei woman. And I thought it was cool how he's playing hardball with China with regard to her. Okay, there. I said something nice about Trudeau, even though I think he's probably trying to take away my guns, my rightfully owned property. And so that's a sign.
None of that is him personally. That's all a facade. It's a charade that they just play politics. But he represents a party, and the party represents a whole bunch of constituents, and they don't even talk to their constituents.
No.
But all of these people got into the game not to make money and get power. Like, why would you want to run Canada? If you wanted power, you would go to another country and run for politics. And if you were going to run for politics, it would probably be easier to make a whole bunch of money and just pay off politicians. Politics is a hard job. It's way easier to make a shitload of money and just bribe them.
Well, and like, the other part of it,
don't go into politics for power and money. They're there because they have some shred of decency in them, and they have some knowledge in them, most of them.
Yeah.
But we just disagree on principles, but that's what discussion is for. You want that in a politician.
And to go back to one of your other points is that, everything where you're like, you're punishing people for not being kind all the time or something. And these people that we keep characterizing, now say, Trudeau's trying to look nice. As part of his public image and PR team is that he's this, kind, benevolent, woke prime minister that always has the little guy, and he's always smiling. He's always looking, personable and approachable. That's all PR. That's not him. Anybody who gets into politics has to be hard. You have to be thick-skinned. You have to be an asshole, because you just couldn't do the job without it. You have to sit down and be like, so do you want to keep your job, or are you going to vote for me on this? I will ruin your life, because, that's
politics, baby.
That's politics. You have to, it's people, everybody wants something. And some of it's like, I need infrastructure deals in my constituent. And then other guys like, why are my fishermen not allowed to fish, at this time? Why we need retooling of the laws, because my fishermen literally aren't allowed to fish because you killed licensing in this other province, and now I'm not allowed to fish. My constituents are yelling at me, and they're like, you have to balance this. And part of that is, smacking people into line, the whip, literally is what they call it.
Yeah. Party whip.
And so anybody in politics, they're being nice, but just like a server, they're not smiling on the inside. Your server is not happy because they're working as a server. They want to go home.
But they're also not like these evil, finger tenting demons. Like, they're not these bad guys,
Unless you're Romanian, then that's not the case.
There are a few, like Mitch McConnell, the Lukashenko, Putin. There are villains out there, don't get me wrong. But I'm just saying, by and large, the people we elect aren't Elon Musk's. They're not out trying to fix the world for themselves and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Elon Musk is an interesting case.
I love Elon Musk. He's so interesting. Him alone should have his own episode just on the evolution of humanity. And then there's Elon Musk at the top, this weird branch of our tree in time.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually going to take that and segue that a bit, because one of the things that people complain about Elon Musk is he works his people so hard. He works his people but they don't have to. They can quit. They're working for Elon Musk in a free country. Now, the people he employs in China are another case. Those are literally slaves. You can't convince me otherwise. Taiwan's a country. Cancel me, buggers.
Taiwan's a country, yes.
Yeah.
Language, currency, military force, their own politics.
I don't agree with everything he does, and I don't have to. I'm not Elon Musk. He doesn't have to. And trying to appease everybody and to think that your unique perspective is something that someone at the top needs to appease when you're just some guy on the internet, you don't matter. I'm sorry. Part of growing up is realizing that you are not the center of the universe, that you don't actually matter, and being okay with that. It's kind of zen. But one of the things is that the people working for Elon Musk, a lot of time, Now, these are people, it's like I remember talking to someone who's like, oh, I hate him. He puts so much CO2 in the atmosphere and he makes his people work 17 hours a day. It's like, if you are a rocket scientist or a rocket engineer and you get to work for the people doing the most innovation in rocketry, you probably have to tear them away from it to not work 24 hours a day. And
how many people get to work for a boss who puts their own money into a company that's like going bankrupt?
Right.
I mean, I had a boss like that once in my life, and I've had like 20 something jobs. And it was a life-changing experience working for a man that dedicated to the company. Like, I wanted the company to succeed so that it would help him. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So there are things to love about Elon, but like, I mean, a lot of people have bad regard.
Yeah, a lot of people hate him for just stupid ideological. Like, I don't like him.
Yeah, like Dogecoin and crypto and
like, that's a meme. He's like, if you take that
or smoking weed on a podcast, I'm like, whatever, man. The guy's a billionaire. Literally, he could do anything he wants. Just let him do it. It's not a big deal.
Great podcast. Like, he's just so chill.
But nobody's like that about Peter Thiel for being obsessive or, autistic or whatever he is, Asperger's syndrome or something, or like
because he's a victim.
Gross.
Elon Musk isn't a victim. Elon Musk is like some kind of Ayn Rand hero, where it's just like, I'm going to do my thing. Oh, who's going to let you do that? And, he's probably going to go like, who's going to stop me?
Yeah. And on the flip side, though, he's like a white guy raised in privilege. So like, people want to demonize him just because he was born lucky, but like,
right. Well, he was born lucky enough to study coding
for being lucky. Like, you should be happy for other human beings.
Mm-hmm. At the same time, though,
this mentality where everybody who has more than me is like some demon that I have to knock down and take what they have.
See, like, that's communist rhetoric. A lot of times, if you Mott and Bailey those people, like, oh, there should be no billionaires, and then it's like, are you sure? Well, like, what happens if you were accidentally a billionaire and you force them?
What happens if one person creates a whole bunch of super valuable things? Like, what if the guy who invents like the greenest concrete, and concrete's one of the biggest pollutants in the world, what if that person gave this concrete to everybody and charged the smallest royalty? You could have charged more, but they charged the smallest royalty. Still becomes a multi-billionaire from it. Are you really going to begrudge them when they've changed the world and fixed the climate crisis?
Well, and the thing is that Elon Musk worked for it. Like, he might have been born into privilege,
but he's a genius.
He invented, like, he was working on PayPal. He put the work in. Like, same with Jeff Bezos and Jack Dorsey. Even though I don't like those guys on a personal level, that doesn't matter. And if they I don't really need them to know that I think that they're doofuses. And so,
and it's irrelevant too, right?
Right.
They're just strangers.
But one of the things that I think of when I think of Elon Musk is that these people are working on their passion. And so, part of being an adult again, part of being a child is you're playing. It doesn't matter. And you have this play. It's this there's little responsibility to it. The effects of the play are not going to have much impact. And so it's safe. It's like playing a video game and then pressing save every time you get to a hard part, so you can, quick save or something. And so there's not really much in it.
I'm so bad for that.
Oh, there's some games where it's like necessary. It's just like, these bosses are so hard, you need to just. But at the same time, once you find something that has meaning, and you want to, an adult will realize that sacrifices towards certain things are not necessary, but healthy. You work 16 hours a day on a project. Well, why so I can be rich? It's like, no, because it enriches your life. You are a rocket engineer. So what are you going to do? Well, I'm working with rockets. How happy is that person to be working that long? Someone making video games, a lot of times they mistreat them. And a lot of these calls for, people in the video game industry. Now, a lot of companies do treat their employees badly, but if you're working in video games, you might have to actually be reminded, dude, get paid for your work. Don't do work that you're not getting paid for. Oh man, I was just, you might have to remind them that their sacrifice needs to be rewarded. And this happens a lot. I don't really like I'm volunteering technically right now at the provincial archives. But I'm still getting something out of it. even though I'm putting the work in. And so what it is as an adult is to see that calculus of your actions and to know that what you're doing is important. But a lot of times, and this is different than play. So that, I'm trying to contrast play and work, the sacrifice for reason, and then activity without any consequences, because all of your activity at work will have consequences. You do a bad job, you get fired. But if you're just playing a game, oh, it's just a game, don't worry. And this is what a lot of these children are complaining about. These 30-year-old, 40-year-old children are complaining about is like, I want a job that's safe. I want a job that I can't lose from doing a bad job. And this is definitely hurting us, because part of being an adult is finding that thing that you're good at least in a free society, because a lot of the rules change when you're in a communist or feudalist or fundamentalist society. Being an adult means a lot more closer to like
I think our play changes
taking a role.
Like our play becomes part of our work when we're older.
Yes.
When you're a kid, everything is a game, because you have no concept of real life until you receive a whole bunch of stimulus over years and years and years, and become self-aware or whatever in your teens. But like after you become self-aware, you become selfish, or less selfish, sorry. First, you're born selfish, where all you do is cry for food, and you get food. You cry when you're wet.
You have to be.
Wiped.
Was it babies are inherently selfish, and because they have to be.
But once you're self-aware, like 8, 9 years old or whatever, you start to think of like personality traits and identity and who you want to be, what your interests are, your favorite colors, like all these really rudimentary questions that like adults don't ask each other what their favorite colors are, right?
Sometimes they do.
As a tendency.
Yeah.
But as you get older, and part of that transition into adulthood you start thinking about yourself in the world. Like the world becomes part of you, because you're born into the world. And it's like, you're not just born into your body and your mind, you're born into your body and your mind and the world.
So you need to integrate yourself into the world.
Changing the world, though, with a childish play perspective, like you want to just have, like, it's like running around with the Monopoly board and like taking other people's pieces and like being that micromanager that fixes everything so everything's perfect and neat and fair, and nobody plays with, bills that are ripped up or whatever.
The difference is consequences.
Well, the thing is, they don't realize the consequences because they're ignorant of the actual world, right? They're trying to fix the world, but they have a childish idea of the world because they never experienced it.
Well, then the world backlashes upon them. Like we've all had the world backlash upon us, every single one of us. Why did you do that?
The rude awakening, I call them.
Yeah, and I've had a couple, a few we're not going to talk about on here. There was a cat involved and an abandoned house. That's as much as I'm going to say. But they're rude awakening. You shouldn't have been doing that. And a lot of times, like when you're playing a video game or when you're watching TV, you're not, the people get out of it, or the people are clever enough to deal with it because they're in different situations than you. But being an adult is knowing your situation, integrating it, just like you said. But the consequences between play and work, or play and adult play, I guess, are different, because you are you're dealing with the consequences of your action. You're always dealing with the consequences of your action. If you're not attentive to that, then the consequences are just gonna smack you in the face. And then everyone says, oh, but what if we had not those consequences? What if we made it so that people just wouldn't kill people? Or what if we just told guys not to rape women? It's like, well, that's not how it works. You have to be aware of your surroundings. You have to be aware of the chaos in the system, but you also have to be aware that you might not actually be good enough. And
it's not a personal slight to be less good at something. Like they
didn't hire me because I'm black, or because I'm trans, or because I'm
but even if somebody's smarter than me or better at math, and they do their job better because I have a math heavy job or whatever, it says nothing about my value as a human being if that other human being just happens to be better at their job. You know what I mean? Like it's not a threat to me.
Well, if
at work though, when you have these children who don't mature into like proper adults, every little thing is a threat. You say like, you didn't do that as well as I'd like you to do it like this. Don't come to me with incomplete forms. Like, I want a complete form and then I'll process it. Like, just simple, basic, let's do our jobs together type of stuff.
Right.
Comes like tears and you know, like sitting down with an arbitrator and spending an hour on like writing down statements of inclusivity or whatever.
I need a safe room.
Yeah.
Like wasting all this time on, you know, being
but like
taught,
the energy and the expertise, like you're getting somebody 12 years of education, then 5 years of university education, then 5 more years of work, like practicum and work related. And then they come to a workplace and they just administer all these like disputes that shouldn't even exist because people aren't growing the fuck up.
You get like social justice counselors, like there's like Ibram X Kendi and stuff. They go around and they get paid like you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars to
like
consult businesses and to say, now let's all look at our privilege, which is just a way of saying like, we need to make life more fair. Life needs to be fair. No, part of being an adult is realizing that life isn't fair and then going ahead with your life in spite of that. And it's like, oh, you're born a certain way. Yeah, I wasn't born with an arm. Oh, well, we should make it so that person, like, no, I'm not going to treat a person without an arm as if they have an arm. Or I'm not going to like say, well, because so-and-so doesn't have an arm, everyone else in the workplace has to also
like put their arm behind their shoulders.
Yeah, it's like an old Kurt Vonnegut book where, you know, he went to the future or something. And everyone's like, oh, if you're too pretty, you have to wear a face mask. And everyone's got to have handicaps. You know, it's like, no, we are all supposed to play off of our strengths. And
speaking as a disabled person, I wouldn't want anybody to act disabled to help me or make me feel better about it. You know what I mean? Like that's absolutely ridiculous. It does nothing to solve the problem. It costs everybody. Even if it doesn't cost money, people don't want to be forced to do stuff, especially if it's meaningless. Like, especially if it's meaningless. If you're being forced to treat somebody differently, specifically because of the color of their skin, and you're telling them don't be racist, but treat this one person differently. Right. Like, what messages are you sending there? You're not fixing the world's problems, you're causing them.
Right. Well, it's I don't know, I keep thinking, I got like 2 examples of this in my head. One of them is the police. When I was applying for the Winnipeg police force, it's easier to get into the police force if you're a woman or if you're Aboriginal. Well, and I think that's not fair, you know, blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, they do need more Aboriginal people for the nature of the job in Winnipeg, period. So and
it's helpful to the police force to have somebody who actually understands the culture. And
it's not a slight against me. They're not being like, oh, well, you know, we don't need you. You know, honestly, I was crap. I didn't do good. It gave me a growing experience and it matured me, but you know, you need to take the L and move on. But at the same time, the other thing is that you get at the other side of this, if I make a big fuss of it, I'm like doing exactly what you said. I'm making it worse. I'm making the situation, you know, rah, 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 there's racism against white people. It's like, well, yeah, there is. Of course there is. There's racism against every group. Like, calm down. Like, move on and just don't be the guy being the racist.
Yeah, just speak out against racism. Don't create it.
But then you get I don't know, like some of my wife's classmates who are just stuck there claiming that they need to be given special preference because, you know, there's racism against them or something. Or one of my favorite ones was like this one guy said that to this one guy said, oh, you know, I got an email, something about a Nigerian prince. And some girl who was Nigerian was like, that's racism. And she outed him for that publicly. Neither of these people were white, but you know, you can't say anything and you end up, because you're seeing slights and because you don't want a world and you want everything to be fair and just, you're actually just stirring things up and you end up making things more, well, just like you said, you're making things worse.
Mm-hmm. But I think that all comes down to like a lack of maturity. Fundamentally, is when people are getting that offended over simple things like pronouns or microaggressions or whatever. Like the whole radical left movement isn't immaturity. It's just screaming immaturity, because that's what children do. That's not fair. And then they want to change it by punishing people, because that's what you do in elementary school. You punish kids when they act out.
Well, you could extend that to
radical thing would be, here's a scripted proposal of changes we could make, and here's the data and how that will fix the problem. Like, you actually produce some type of solution when you're an adult, or you say nothing. If you can't think of a better plan than affirmative action, say nothing. If somebody asks your opinion, you give your opinion, and you don't like slander people personally, and those people don't get offended that you have an opinion. Like, and that's how you act as an adult.
It's the same exact thing as saying something like, now this is going to be very historically relevant. It's the same thing as saying, you know, oh, the Jews did this, which is kind of a joke. I mean, you stub your toe and went, oh, the Jews did this, which is funny, because the whole idea that the Jews would just sit there and, you know, plan you stubbing your toe or you getting a car crash or something. Or,
well, they all conspired against you.
Yeah, it's like, it's absolutely asinine.
But that's that selfishness of children, right? They think that the world is out to get them because the whole world cares about them. Nobody cares about you. Unless you're super rich or really, really good looking, nobody cares about you. So to think the whole world is out to get you, you'd have to be really rich or really pretty, or both.
Well, and you don't need, and like seeing what's in, again, part of the maturity is seeing what's important, and like who actually does care about you. Well, your family. Well, my wife cares about me. I'm pretty sure my cat cares about me. He's sleeping over there. But,
more or less.
Yeah, more or less. And that's the things that I should be interested in. And like, I don't know, going online and raving about stuff. Wait, isn't that what we're doing right now? But I guess what we're trying to do here is come to a consensus about, no, not a consensus. We're trying to, sorry, my brain just farted there. We're trying to come to a understanding of what it means to actually have grown up. And if there's certain things about it that really point away from it. And part of being is have like immature reactions to things, not trying to see the nature of what you're engaged with. Living in your parents' basement is a big dog whistle for you still being a child. But a lot of it is, when I grew up, I started not being interested in certain childish things. Like stuff just stopped being interesting. And one thing I noticed, oh man, I hope none of them are watching. I'm kind of going to call them out here. I worked at a board game restaurant, which is kind of fun. You know, you can come in, just do something trivial for a bit while over a meal, play a board game. It's not my thing. I liked a few of them, but I just could never get into it. But that was their life. Their life was wrapped up in trivia and trivial things. And it just seemed like they hadn't left the playground, and they were just, you know, interested in magic cards and board games, and everything was with regard to a board game. And like,
yeah, the way I see it, it's kind of like those guys with the train set, right? They can be professional heavy-duty mechanics at work, and then they come home and play with their trains. No big deal. They make bottle ships and bottles or whatever. No big deal. It's the people who get stuck in that rut, and they just rock back and forth, right? Yeah. Where they just play games and go to board games and make enough money to pay rent so they can play more games and play more board games, and you know what I mean? They just back and forth over and over again. To me,
that's an absolute and utter tragedy for me, because like,
it's a waste of life, I think.
Yeah, that's why it's a tragedy. Like, you get to the end and like, well, what did you do? And I'll be like, oh, I made a shelf. It's like, what's better?
But here's the thing, like, what do you remember from a lifetime of that? Like, you'll remember the games and you'll remember your score, and a couple times you had a really big win, but like, that's nothing compared to like Niagara Falls, or, you know, building a car, or, you know, backpacking across Europe, like things that you actually remember on your deathbed.
Well, it doesn't. And I think the thing is that when you are an adult, what you're interested in is things that add, or things that integrate with your life. Like I'm starting to get like my pursuits. I don't know. I talk about firearms a lot, but like I do a lot of tinkering, but a lot of what, like, I build shelves in my spare time. Like I got a closet here that I shelved up so I could store things in it, and like a lot of my interests are aligning with having my life right now have more meaning and integrating my life and creating beauty in my surroundings, and so that I can lead a richer life rather than just live something trivial. And there is room for the trivia, because like we had that entire episode about video games and why it's okay to rest, it's okay, but you can't let that be your life when everything, like you said, is geared towards just that like playing a video game. It's like, what do you do? Oh, I play League of Legends or something. It's like, Jesus, buddy, like you're 26, like you have a job.
But like that's different from like 2 hours on a weekend or after work or something, and not and like all the time. You know what I mean? Where you don't cook, you don't clean, you don't exercise, you don't go outside and breathe air and talk to human beings at coffee shops. Like, I'm not saying you have to live this extravagant life for it to be worthwhile and like, backpacking across Europe. My favorite times in my life was just walking down the street, sitting outside in the morning and having a coffee on a patio at my coffee shop. Familiar people I know, neighborhood people just walking by, just peaceful. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be flashy and extravagant to be worthwhile and meaningful. Like, there's no problem with having vices or game, like not just games, but like anything you come home to, like your sitcoms or TV shows, or with some people it's the soap operas.
I watch hockey.
or sports is huge. People get really, really into sports, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But when it's all consuming and all encompassing, and you can't function at a normal civic level, like when you neglect your civic duties to play a game, that's a problem. When you don't create commitments and sacrifice your free time to have a greater an exploration of greater things. Like, I'm not saying people have to get married to be successful in life, but I'm saying if you don't make commitments to people, then you never experience it.
Right.
You're missing out on this huge point of life because of some childish, self-centered self-interest, right?
Well, you've integrated yourself into the society, but
just being outside and exercise, taking care of your body, like all of these things, like cooking, spending time to cook.
Yeah.
I can't drill that enough. Not just because it's good for your health, but the meditation of preparing food is good for your brain. That matures you. That creates an adulthood in you. That helps you manage stuff at work so you don't get offended so easily. Like, they sound like they're disconnected, but they're not, in my opinion.
One of the things that you're saying, like cook, and you march across Europe. Maybe don't do that.
You're stepping.
You walk. Yeah.
Just to offend the neighbors.
Like, where are you going next? I'm going into Poland next. But
strudel.
You backpack across, foreign lands and stuff, and you're learning stuff. But the problem is that a lot of like what we're doing nowadays, that we're seeing the shallow aspects of these. We're seeing, with regard to like Facebook posts and Instagram and all that garbage, is that you have an image of it and you do it for the shallow representation. I'm someone that backpacked across Europe. You're not someone who learned a bunch of stuff while backpacking across Europe,
or learned about yourself or anything.
I went to Italy for 2 weeks and I learned a whole bunch of lessons. It's not like, I was in Italy, it was great. No, it's like, man, I learned a stupid amount of lessons. Like, it was a historical tour, so I learned like a lot of that, but it made me very appreciative of being in Canada. That's for sure.
Yeah. I was just going to say, when I was teaching in Mexico, I went to an orphanage, and like that just opened my eyes. I never before realized how rich we are in Canada, even though I was poor my whole life. And like, I was dead scared of being poor forever. Like, that was my prime motivator, even as a child, to try and start working. But when I saw true poverty, like true abject poverty, and like dogs that are emaciated dogs just trolling around the neighborhood and stuff like that, like the fact that I could go home and work and send money to help these people, just the idea of it was like, now I'm not motivated just by poverty. I'm motivated to fix the world.
Well, I remember I had the same feeling going into one of our friends' places. It was by Bourbon Street Billiards. It was around there, and we went in. I can't remember which of your friends it was.
I think it was probably Naga.
Yeah, I think it was Naga. And we went to his place, and there's just people yelling. Like, I knew Naga was like a good guy, and I just went into this place, and I was just like, the place itself made me be like, all I wanted to do at that point, like, was write an essay, go apply for a job. Like, I already have a job. Go apply for a bed, like, do something so that you don't end up here in this. Like, the place had an aura about it. I hate saying like that, but it had a feeling about it.
That to me is some of my best memories.
Oh no, I loved hanging out with them.
It's just different between people. That's all.
Yeah, it was the place itself. I just remember it so vividly that, like, there was like, you know when you see in a movie and they go into an apartment building and they want to make it seem sketchy, so they have like husband and wife arguing behind a door. Yeah, like it had that.
And like people's doors are wide open and there's like a couch sitting on the front lawn. Like,
yeah,
in a dumpster.
It wasn't a good place. And I felt the urge to do something with my life instantly there. It's like, I should be studying right now. And
to me, it felt like home, like a community. You know, when strangers or guests come over, you clean up and vacuum and everything looks perfect. But like when your friends and family come over who are always over, you know, it's laid back, it's chill.
Like it's chill, but it's chill in a vacuumed living room for me.
Yeah. I'm just saying it's different between people, but like it's neat that those types of situations can inspire different thoughts in different people too.
And what I think is that we're getting a lot of shallow representations of what maturity is. And like, oh look, I did something artistic. It's like, cool. Like, I don't care. Like, and you want the presentation of adulthood instead of actual adulthood, and then people don't understand actual adulthood. And they, like, a lot of times you can tell because you'll say something and someone will cower in front of you, and I just find it absolutely insane. Or they'll say, oh wow, you're so self-aware. It's like, am I? Like, I guess, like, I am self-aware, but like, you should be too. Like, this isn't something strange. This is something you should all aspire to have. And
again, I can't help but drill this home, and this will be my final comment on the subject matter, but this is why philosophy is important. This is why philosophy is important, to have these thoughts, to mature, to grow as a person, to like refine your goals and your values and your core principles, your driving motivations, everything that inspires you. You think it through with philosophy because it forces you to like hit every angle of every thought. Well, you know what I mean? And that is critical to like growth and development and living a full life.
Well, like coin our phrase, maybe like philosophy. Daily philosophy, or like the banal philosophy of just like, well, we both did this and we both said we did this. Coming back to the beginning, probably a good place to start wrapping up is that.
Oh, I like that.
Is that when I was 14 and waking up in my bed at 14 going like, all right, I need to become a man now. That was the start of a philosophical journey. That was starting me being like, why? What am I doing? What am I doing? Who am I? I don't know who I am. Why do I need to grow up? Like, what am I dissatisfied with? And what do I need to do to become a man? And it's, for me, I think that is a lot of what we talked about today. Now, one of the things I realized is that this is applicable to both sexes. If you are a man, becoming a man is the same thing as becoming a woman.
Oh, all 10 sexes. There's 10 of them now.
Oh, you are a bigot. Don't you know about the infinity?
Yeah, you got to grow into your queerdom.
The infinity rainbow. God, they've ruined rainbows. Rainbows were so cool, but now they're just a political tool. And
I'm just saying, like, no matter what your what do you call that, proclivity is.
Well, that's why I say man and woman, because you're contrasting that with girl and boy. When you're a boy, it's something specific. When you're a man, that's something different. And what it means to do requires that work to be put in. And it's the same type of work. It's the same questions as going from being a girl to a woman. That's the same process. It's different stops, but it's going to be different for every single individual. Like we said, like when I went into that one apartment, I got that like time to mature, and I was pretty well on my way to being mature even at that point. But I knew I still had a fair ways to go. And you had the same feeling when you went into well, the gratitude too, but the same feeling when you went into that orphanage. Like you said, we had the same process was going on, but it was unique to our individual, and it's going to be different for men and women, but it's still the same process. It's still the same process. And the ultimate part of it, I think this is where I'm going to full stop, is acceptance of that personal responsibility. The ability to say, I got this. I, me, ego, in the Latin, I've got this. And not, I'm going to let somebody else do it. I'm going to extend myself as much as I can. I'm going to be the action, the person who is active and taking a role in my life. And that's what's happening when you're parenting. You're the one providing. I'm going to take this. I'm going to give. I'm going to provide. I'm going to do, so that you can go and eventually say, okay, now I'm going to provide.
And that's similar to that decisiveness you were talking about. That was like your ideal man back then.
Yeah. And so it's the person that's willing to take personal responsibility. And that's what it comes down to. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all I got to say.
Cool. Well, thanks for listening. You've been tuned into Frivolous Gravitas, as always, with myself, Christopher Driver, and
me,
Jordan Roy. Catch us on iTunes, RSS feed in the description. Links are in the description. We're on Facebook and social media and stuff. So we don't ask for your money. We just ask for your likes. Thumb me. Finger me.
All right, bye, guys.
Demonetize the whole video for me then. Give me a thumbs up, my ass.
Jeez.
I don't know. Thanks for the talk.